Your desired life already exists. In another timeline, right now, not someday, not after you work harder or become worthy or figure out the steps. Right now, in this exact moment, there's a version of you living in the reality you've been chasing. Same face, same history, different choices, different timeline. And here's what nobody told you. The distance between here and there isn't measured in years or effort. It's measured in observation, in focus, in the precise mental operation that collapses possibility into reality. What if you could collapse that distance in seconds? Most people spend decades climbing toward their goals, saving, studying, networking, grinding. They treat desire like a mountain to scale. But quantum collapsers don't climb. They simply claim what already exists. They understand something that sounds insane until you see it work. The life you want isn't ahead of you. It's beside you, stacked on top of you, occupying the same space you're in right now, just vibrating at a different frequency. The cheat code isn't visualization. It isn't affirmations or vision boards or manifesting journals. It's something physics discovered 100 years ago that nobody thought to apply to their bank account or their relationships or their body. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. Once you understand how observation collapses reality, every moment becomes a choice point. Every thought becomes a timeline selector. But first, 3 questions. Why do identical twins with identical genetics and identical upbringing end up in radically different realities? One becomes a millionaire, the other struggles. One finds love easily, the other doesn't. Same DNA, same childhood, different timelines. What happened at the fork? Second question. What did Werner Heisenberg's uncertainty principle reveal about manifestation that every guru missed? And third, how does a 12-year-old Minecraft speedrunner's strategy for beating the game in under 10 minutes apply to collapsing your dream timeline this week? Stay with me. By the end of this, you'll have answers that change everything. Let's start with something that sounds like science fiction, but is actually just science. The multiverse isn't theory. It's your operating system. Right now, you're running on an outdated understanding of reality. You think you're in one universe, on one timeline, living one life. But quantum mechanics proved something extraordinary in the 1950s that most people still haven't integrated. Every choice you didn't make still happened. Somewhere. When you chose your current job, the version of you that chose the other job didn't disappear. It kept going. When you stayed in that relationship or left it, both versions of you continued. The path you walked and the path you didn't walk are both real. Both physical. Both happening. Hugh Everett's many worlds interpretation isn't some fringe idea anymore. It's the dominant explanation among quantum physicists for why particles behave the way they do. And here's the part that matters to you. If it's true for particles, it's true for you. Because you're made of particles. Every atom in your body obeys quantum rules. Every electron, every quark, you are a quantum system, which means you exist in superposition, in multiple states simultaneously until something collapses you into one specific timeline. And that something is observation. Your observation. Most people hear parallel universes and think of them as distant, unreachable places. Different planets, different dimensions. But the language is wrong. They're not parallel. They're concurrent. They're layered. Imagine a film reel with infinite frames. You're experiencing one frame right now. The frame where you're listening to this, but the frame where you're already wealthy exists on the same reel. The frame where you're in your ideal relationship is right there beside this one. The frame where your body looks and feels exactly how you want it to look and feel is stacked on top of this moment. Same film, different frames. And here's the key. You can switch frames. The double-slit experiment proved this in a way that terrified physicists for decades. When you shoot a single particle at 2 slits, it goes through both slits simultaneously. It exists in multiple places at once, until you observe it. The moment you measure which slit it went through, it collapses into one position. Before observation, infinite possibility. After observation, one reality. Your life works the same way. Before you focus, you exist across infinite timelines. The moment you observe a specific reality, you collapse into it. Most people just don't realize they're observing. They're collapsing timelines unconsciously, randomly. Whatever they think about most, whatever they believe most deeply. That's what they get. There's a man I know, an architect, who discovered this by accident. For 3 years, his firm was drowning. Debt, clients leaving, reputation damaged. Every morning he'd wake up and observe the failure. Check the bank account, negative. Check the calendar, empty. Check his email, rejections. He was collapsing the bankrupt timeline every single day with his attention. Then one morning, something shifted. He remembered a decision point from 5 years earlier. A moment where he'd almost taken a different project. A bigger client. Higher risk. He'd said no out of fear. And in that moment, he realized, there's a timeline where I said yes. A timeline where that project launched my firm into success, where I never had these 3 years of struggle. So he did something strange. He started living from that timeline, not hoping for it, not visualizing it, living from it. He started observing the successful firm as if it had never failed. He checked his empty bank account and saw it as temporarily low, not permanently broken. He walked into his empty office and felt the hum of a busy firm that just happened to be between meetings. Within 6 weeks, a former client called. They'd recommended him to someone. That someone became his biggest project in a decade. Within 6 months, his firm had more work than he could handle. He didn't fix the business. He switched timelines. He collapsed into the version where the business never broke. You exist in all success and failure states simultaneously until you measure, until you observe, until you decide which version is real. Quantum superposition isn't just for particles in labs. It's the structure of your life. Right now, there's a version of you that made different choices at every major fork in your past. The job you didn't take, the person you didn't date, the city you didn't move to, the business you didn't start. All of those versions exist. And here's what most people miss. Those timelines aren't sealed off. They're accessible, not through regret, not through time travel, through observation, through choosing to collapse into a different frame. Think about your own life for a moment. Think about one decision you made in the past 5 years that created a major fork. Maybe you took a job or turned one down. Maybe you moved or stayed. Maybe you ended a relationship or started one. Now ask yourself, can you feel the ghost of the other choice? Can you sense the version of you that went the other way? That's not your imagination. That's quantum entanglement. That's you sensing the other timeline. And if you can sense it, you can collapse into it. You can switch frames. Let me walk you through an exercise right now. It'll take about 90 seconds. Close your eyes if you're somewhere safe to do that. If not, just soften your gaze. Take a deep breath in through your nose. Hold it for 4 counts. Exhale slowly through your mouth. Do that 2 more times. Breathing in, holding, releasing. Good. Now bring to mind one moment from your past where you made a choice that you sometimes wonder about. Not with regret, just curiosity. A fork in the road. See that moment clearly. The place, the time, the feeling. Now imagine the other choice, the one you didn't make. Let yourself feel what that timeline would have felt like. Not the details, just the energy, the texture, the emotional signature. Stay there for a few seconds. Notice, does that timeline feel heavy or light? Constrictive or expansive? Whatever you feel, just observe it. Don't judge it. Now take one more deep breath and open your eyes. That timeline you just touched, it exists. And you just proved to yourself that you can access it. Now let's talk about desire. Because most people misunderstand what desire actually is. They treat it like a wish, a hope, a request sent out into the universe with fingers crossed. But desire isn't a wish. Desire is a coordinate. It's a set of quantum data that points to a specific timeline. When you feel desire for something, you're not imagining a future that might happen. You're sensing a timeline that already exists. Desire is your internal GPS pinging you. There's a version of you over here. This way, this frequency. Come find it. Manifestation fails for most people because they treat desire like a letter to Santa. They ask. They hope, they wait. But asking implies you don't have it. Hoping implies it might not come. Waiting implies it's in the future. All of that is classical physics thinking. Linear time. Cause and effect. If I do this, then that happens. But quantum physics doesn't work that way. In quantum mechanics, the effect can precede the cause. The future can reach backward and rearrange your present. And desire is the signal. It's the entanglement between your current timeline and the target timeline. The moment you feel desire, you're already connected to the thing. The timeline where you have it is reaching back to you, pulling you toward it. But here's the problem. Most desires are too vague. They're blurry coordinates. I want more money. I want a better relationship. I want to be healthier. Those aren't addresses. Those are directions. North, somewhere north. But how far north? What does north look like? Smell like? Feel like? If you can't describe the timeline with sensory precision, you can't collapse into it. Your quantum system doesn't know which frame to land on. There are infinite timelines with more money. Which one? The timeline where you have an extra $100? Or the one where you have an extra $1 million? The timeline where money came from your job, or the one where it came from an unexpected windfall. Vague coordinates create vague collapses. There's a protocol I teach called the 5 sense blueprint. You're going to describe your target timeline using all 5 senses, not just vision, because most people only visualize. They see the car, the house, the partner, but vision alone is weak. It's two-dimensional. The timelines that collapse fastest are the ones you can taste, smell, hear, touch, feel in your body. Let me give you an example. There was a woman who wanted a higher salary. She'd been asking for a raise for 2 years. Meditating on it, visualizing the number in her bank account. Nothing. Then she tried the 5 sense blueprint. She described the exact office she'd work in at that salary level. The texture of the chair, leather, slightly cool against the back of her legs. The smell, fresh coffee from the executive lounge, mixed with the faint scent of new carpet. The sound, quieter than her current cubicle. Softer voices, the hum of better air conditioning. The taste, sparkling water from the glass bottles they keep stocked on her floor, not the tap water from the plastic cups in the break room. The feeling, the weight of confidence in her chest when she walks in. The ease in her shoulders. She spent 15 minutes writing this out. Not visualizing, writing, describing, building the sensory blueprint. Within 3 weeks, her company restructured. A position opened. She applied. She got it. Salary, $240,000. Exactly the number she'd written. But here's the detail that proves it was a timeline collapse, not luck. The office she walked into had the exact chair she'd described. Leather, cool. She'd never seen that office before. She'd never been on that floor. But she'd already experienced it. She'd already collapsed into the timeline where she sat in that chair every day. Her quantum system recognized the coordinates and locked on. So here's what you're going to do. You're going to write your target timeline's sensory script. Set a timer for 15 minutes. Describe one scene from your desired timeline. Not the whole life. One moment. A morning routine. A work meeting. A dinner. Whatever feels most alive to you. Describe it in present tense. I wake up and the sheets feel like this. I hear this sound. I smell this scent. I taste this flavor. I see this view. I feel this emotion in my body. Be specific. Specific enough that if someone else read it, they'd know exactly what timeline you're tuning into. Because specificity is the key. Vague coordinates create vague results. Precise coordinates create instant collapses. And here's the other half of the protocol. The emotional signature. Every timeline has a unique feeling frequency. Your current timeline feels a certain way. Your target timeline feels different. You have to identify that difference. Most people skip this step. They describe the circumstances but ignore the energy. And the energy is everything. Because you don't collapse into timelines by thinking about them. You collapse into them by matching their frequency. By feeling what that timeline feels like before the evidence shows up. Right now, think about your current timeline. How does it feel? Not what you think about it, how it feels in your body. Heavy? Tight? Restless? Contracted? Just notice. No judgment. Now think about your target timeline, the one you just described. How does that one feel? Lighter? More spacious? Calmer? More energized? Notice the difference. That difference is the gap you're collapsing. And here's the secret. You can feel the target timeline's frequency right now. You don't have to wait for the circumstances to change. You can match the frequency first. And once you match it, the circumstances rearrange themselves to reflect the timeline you're on. But be careful. Gratitude and desperation emit almost identical quantum interference patterns. Both of them block collapse. Gratitude, when it's real, is powerful. But forced gratitude? Trying to feel grateful for what you have so the universe gives you more? That's desperation in disguise. That's observing lack and trying to cover it with positive thinking. The universe doesn't hear your words. It reads your frequency. And desperation, even when it's dressed up as gratitude, still vibrates at the frequency of not having. Real gratitude doesn't look at what you don't have. It doesn't need to. It's already full. It's already complete. That's the frequency that collapses timelines, not the frequency of trying to be full so you can finally get more. Let's go deeper now into the collapse mechanism itself. Because understanding the theory is one thing. Knowing how to trigger the collapse is another. The observer effect in quantum mechanics is simple. Watching changes the outcome. A particle behaves differently when it's observed than when it's not. Before observation, it exists in a probability cloud, everywhere and nowhere. After observation, it snaps into a single location. This isn't philosophy. This is measurable physics. Observation collapses possibility into reality, and you are the observer. Every moment of every day, you're collapsing timelines with your attention. The question is, are you collapsing them consciously or unconsciously? Schrödinger's cat is the famous thought experiment that illustrates this. A cat in a box with a radioactive atom. Until you open the box and observe, the cat is both alive and dead simultaneously. Superposition, two states existing at once. The moment you open the box, the waveform collapses. One state becomes real. The cat is alive or dead, not both. And here's what Schrödinger was trying to show. The universe waits for you to decide what's real. It doesn't decide for you. You decide by observing, by measuring, by focusing your attention. This is called the measurement problem in quantum mechanics, and physicists have argued about it for a century. But for you, it's not a problem. It's the solution. Because if observation collapses reality, then your focused attention is the most powerful tool you have. What you observe becomes real. What you don't observe stays in the probability cloud. So the question becomes, what are you observing all day? Are you observing the timeline you want? Or are you observing the timeline you're trying to leave? Most people observe their current circumstances obsessively. They check their bank account 12 times a day. They scroll through their ex's social media. They stand in front of the mirror and catalog everything they hate about their body. They measure their current reality constantly. And every time they measure, they collapse it again. They lock it in. They make it more real. And then they wonder why nothing changes. It's because they're strengthening the current timeline with their observation. They're telling their quantum system, this is the reality I want to measure. This is the timeline I'm choosing. But there's another way. Focused attention on the target timeline. Not hoping for it. Observing it. Treating it as real. As current. As the reality you're measuring right now. This is what mystics called faith. Not belief, not hope. Faith. The substance of things hoped for. The evidence of things not seen. That's a quantum mechanics description written 2,000 years before quantum mechanics was discovered. Faith is observation before evidence. It's collapsing the desired timeline by treating it as already real, even when the current circumstances scream otherwise. And here's where it gets interesting. Retrocausality. The principle that future events can reach backward and rearrange your present. This has been demonstrated in laboratories. Experiments where the outcome determined the cause, not the other way around. Where a measurement made in the future changed what happened in the past. Time doesn't flow in one direction at the quantum level. Cause and effect aren't linear. The future and past are entangled, which means the timeline you're collapsing into can reach back into your present moment and start rearranging things before you even see the evidence. There's a musician I know who experienced this. He wanted to do a sold-out tour. He'd been playing small venues for years. 50 people, 100 on a good night. But he had this vision of a full theater. Thousands of people. And instead of treating it as a future goal, he started pre-experiencing it. He would close his eyes before every small show and feel what it would feel like to walk onto a stage with a sold-out crowd. He'd hear the roar, feel the heat of the lights, smell. Here's how it works. Set a timer for 90 seconds. Close your eyes. Drop into the sensory script you wrote earlier, the scene from your target timeline. But don't watch it like a movie. Step into it. First person, present tense. You're there. Feel the chair under you. Hear the sounds. Smell the air. Taste the coffee. See the view. Most importantly, feel the emotion. The emotional signature of that timeline. Stay there. When your mind wanders, don't fight it. Just guide it back. 90 seconds of continuous target timeline observation. Do this once a day and you'll start noticing reality shifts within a week. Do it 3 times a day and the collapse accelerates. But there's another technique that works even faster for some people. Revision. This is Neville Goddard's method, and it's pure quantum mechanics even though he never called it that. Revision is overwriting past events to change your current trajectory. Here's the logic. If the past and future are entangled, if time isn't linear, then the past isn't fixed. It's just another timeline, and you can switch which past timeline you're observing. You can collapse into the version of the past where things went differently, and when you do, your present changes to match. Let's say you had a meeting yesterday that went badly. You stumbled, got nervous, didn't land the pitch. That's one timeline. But there's another timeline where the meeting went perfectly, where you were confident, clear, persuasive. That timeline exists too. So tonight, before you sleep, you revise the meeting. You replay it in your mind, but you rewrite it. You see yourself walking in calm, speaking clearly. The client nodding, smiling, agreeing. You feel the success. You see the handshake. You hear the yes. You revise the timeline. You collapse into the version where it went well. And when you wake up tomorrow, reality starts reflecting that revision. Maybe the client emails you. Maybe they give you a second chance. Maybe the deal comes through a different route. But something shifts, because you changed which past you're observing. Try this tonight with something small. Something that happened today or yesterday that didn't go the way you wanted. A conversation, an email, a moment. Revise it, rewrite it in your mind. See it going perfectly, feel the satisfaction. Then let it go. Don't check to see if it worked. Just revise and release. And notice tomorrow what changes. Because it will change. Maybe subtly, maybe dramatically, but something will shift. That's the observer effect in action. That's you collapsing timelines. Now let's talk about identity. Because here's the truth. You can know all the quantum mechanics in the world, but if your identity is misaligned with your target timeline, you'll keep snapping back. Identity is the strongest reality collapse trigger you have. Stronger than visualization, stronger than action, stronger than belief. Because identity determines which timeline feels natural, which one feels like home. And your quantum system will always pull you back to the timeline that matches your identity. Fake it till you make it isn't pop psychology. It's quantum mechanics. Every time you act as if you're already the person in your target timeline, you're sending observation to that timeline. You're collapsing it. Your identity is the lens through which you observe reality. Change the lens, change the reality. But most people try to change circumstances first and identity second. They think, when I get the money, then I'll feel abundant. When I meet the person, then I'll feel loved. When I lose the weight, then I'll feel confident. And that's backward. That's classical physics, cause then effect. But quantum physics is effect then cause. Identity first, circumstances second. There's something called the Heisenberg cut. It's the question of where you end and your environment begins. And the answer is nowhere. There's no boundary. You and your environment are one entangled system. You're not separate from your reality. You're not in your reality. You are your reality, which means when you change your identity, your environment has to change. It has no choice. Because the environment is just the external reflection of the internal observer. Change the observer, and the observation changes. Automatically, instantly. Your brain can't distinguish between doing and being. This is the mirror neuron discovery. When you watch someone perform an action, the same neurons fire in your brain as if you were performing the action yourself. Your brain experiences it as real, which means you can install a new identity just by acting as if. By moving through the world as the version of you who already has what you want. Not pretending, inhabiting. There's a difference. Pretending is fake. Inhabiting is observing a different timeline. There's an entrepreneur I worked with who wanted to raise $2 million for his startup. He'd been pitching investors for a year. No traction. Every meeting felt desperate, hungry, and investors could smell it. So I asked him, what would the funded version of you feel like? How would that version walk into a room? How would he speak? What would he wear? How would he spend his morning? And he described it. The funded version was calm, certain. He didn't need their money. He was just offering them an opportunity. He dressed better, not to impress, but because he valued himself. He spent his mornings reviewing strategy, not panicking over bank balances. So I gave him a challenge. Live as the funded CEO for 30 days. Not visualizing it, being it, even though the bank account was still empty. Even though the investors hadn't said yes. Act as if the $2 million was already in the account. Make decisions from that version. Move through the world as that version. He thought I was insane, but he did it. He bought one good suit, started his mornings with strategy, not panic, walked into investor meetings as if he didn't need them. And within those 30 days, he had 3 term sheets. He closed the round at $2.2 million. He didn't change his pitch. He didn't change his business model. He changed his identity, and reality collapsed to match. So here's your protocol. Write a day-in-the-life script from your desired self's point of view. Present tense. First person. What time do you wake up? What's the first thing you do? What do you wear? What do you eat? How do you move? How do you speak? What do you think about? Write it out in detail. Then read it every morning. And then, throughout your day, make micro-choices from that identity. Your desired self wouldn't check their ex's Instagram, so you don't. Your desired self wouldn't eat that, wouldn't say that, wouldn't tolerate that, so you don't. Every choice is a vote for a timeline. Make sure you're voting for the one you want, and pay attention to your language. Language is identity made audible. The words you use reveal which timeline you're observing. Your current timeline self says, I'm trying to make more money. Your desired timeline self says, I'm expanding my income streams. One is future, one is present, one is effort, one is identity. Notice the phrases you use that reinforce the old timeline. I'm broke. I'm single. I'm stuck. I can't. I don't. Those are observations that collapse you back into the unwanted timeline. Replace them, not with fake affirmations, with identity statements. I'm building wealth. I'm choosing my partner. I'm in transition. I'm learning. I'm becoming. Small shifts, massive impact. And here's something most people don't think about. Your physical body language. Your posture. Your desired timeline self doesn't slouch, doesn't shrink, doesn't apologize for taking up space. So straighten your spine, lift your chin, move with intention, walk like the version of you who already has it. Because your nervous system doesn't know the difference between acting confident and being confident. It just responds to the body language. And when your body language matches your target timeline, your brain releases the neurochemicals of that timeline. Dopamine, serotonin, oxytocin. You chemically become that version. And when you chemically become it, you collapse into it. Try this for 1 week, 7 days. Choose one identity shift. One way your desired self moves through the world differently than your current self. Maybe it's posture. Maybe it's morning routine. Maybe it's how you speak to people. Whatever it is, commit to 7 days of inhabiting that shift and watch what happens. Watch how people treat you differently. Watch how opportunities appear. Watch how your own thoughts change, because identity shifts reality faster than anything else. Now let's talk about obstacles, because you're going to hit them. Not because you're doing something wrong, but because classical physics still runs the visible world, and your brain is wired for classical physics. Logic, cause and effect, evidence-based decision-making. And when you start collapsing timelines, logic screams. It tells you this won't work. You can't afford it. You don't have the skills. You're not qualified. It's impossible. And all of that is true in the current timeline. But you're not staying in the current timeline. You're tunneling to a different one. Quantum tunneling is when a particle passes through a barrier that, according to classical physics, it shouldn't be able to pass through. The particle doesn't have enough energy to go over the wall, but it goes through anyway. It borrows energy from the future. It temporarily violates the laws of physics to get to the other side. And then, once it's through, the energy balances out. This happens constantly at the quantum level. Particles tunnel all the time, and you can too. How do you apply tunneling to money blocks? Time constraints? Skill gaps? You give yourself permission to skip steps. You bypass the logical path. Most people won't do this because they need to know how first. How will? So she started acting as if she were already represented. She created a new series. She didn't post it on Instagram begging for attention. She just created it. And then she did one illogical thing. She sent one email to one gallery. Not a pitch, not a plea, just a simple, I'm working on a new series. Thought you might want to see it when it's ready. That's it. No attachment, no ask, just information. And the gallery director wrote back immediately. Come in next week. She went in. Showed 3 pieces, signed a representation deal that day. She tunneled. She bypassed years of logical steps because she acted from the timeline where she was already represented. This is what I call the impossibility permission slip. You give yourself clearance to skip steps, to act from the end, to do the thing you're not qualified to do, to spend the money you don't have, to move into the space you can't afford, to approach the person who's out of your league. All of these are tunneling actions. They don't make logical sense in the current timeline, but they're normal in the target timeline. And when you act from the target timeline, reality rearranges to support the action. The money shows up. The qualification becomes irrelevant. The person says yes, not because you manifested it, because you collapsed into the timeline where it was already true. But here's the hard part. When you tunnel, your brain goes into panic mode, cognitive dissonance. The gap between what you're doing and what your current circumstances say you should be doing creates psychological tension. And most people bail here. They take the illogical action, feel the tension, and then retreat. They collapse back into the safe timeline, the known timeline, and then they say, see, it didn't work. But it didn't work because they didn't sustain the collapse. They didn't stay in the tunnel long enough to get through. There's a technique called bridge burning. You sever your retreat routes. You make it impossible to go back to the old timeline. This sounds extreme, and it is. But sometimes extreme is what forces the collapse. If you're trying to collapse into a new career but you're keeping your old job as a safety net, you're not tunneling. You're straddling. Straddling keeps you in superposition, one foot in each timeline. And superposition doesn't collapse. You have to fully commit to one timeline for it to become real. Sometimes that means quitting the job before you have the new one, moving to the city before you have the plan, ending the relationship before you meet the new person. These are bridge-burning actions, and they're terrifying, but they work, because they force reality to respond. They give your quantum system no choice but to collapse into the new timeline. I'm not saying be reckless. I'm saying be decisive. There's a difference. Reckless is unconscious. Decisive is intentional. You don't burn bridges randomly. You burn them strategically. You cut off the timelines you're no longer choosing. You make it clear to yourself and to reality, I'm not going back. This is the timeline now. And when you do that, when you fully commit, the universe has no choice but to meet you there. Because you're no longer split. You're no longer divided. You're a focused observer. And focused observation collapses timelines instantly. So here's your exercise. Name your biggest logical obstacle right now. The thing that makes your desired timeline seem impossible. Maybe it's money. Maybe it's time. Maybe it's a skill or credential or connection. Write it down. Now go find someone who bypassed that exact obstacle. Google it. Search forums. Ask people. Find a case study of someone who tunneled through the exact barrier you're facing. And study how they did it. Not to copy them, but to prove to yourself that it's possible. Because once you see that it's been done, your brain stops treating it as impossible. And the moment it stops being impossible, it becomes collapsible. Then take one impossible action this week. One thing that makes no logical sense in your current timeline, but makes perfect sense in your target timeline. Just one, and don't explain it to anyone. Don't justify it. Don't defend it. Just do it. And then watch reality respond. Because it will. It always does. But here's the tricky part. Even after you start collapsing timelines, even after you see evidence, you'll still face interference patterns. These are the hidden forces that snap you back to old timelines. And if you don't learn to neutralize them, you'll keep bouncing between timelines instead of stabilizing in the new one. Quantum coherence is when a system maintains its state. Decoherence is when it collapses back to the default. And your default timeline has momentum. It has weight. It has anchors. You have to identify and cut those anchors or they'll pull you back. The most common interference pattern is the double bind. This is when you want something, but your identity and beliefs are aligned with not having it. You want wealth, but you believe rich people are greedy. You want a relationship, but you believe you're unlovable. You want success, but you believe you don't deserve it. These aren't just thoughts. These are observations. And every time you observe yourself as unworthy or unlovable or incapable, you collapse back into the timeline that proves it. The double bind keeps you in a loop, wanting one thing, collapsing another. The solution is identity revision, not affirmations. Revision. You have to go back and find where the limiting belief got installed. What happened? What did someone say? What did you decide about yourself? And then you revise it. You don't deny it happened. You rewrite what it meant. Maybe someone said you weren't smart enough. You took that as truth. But in another timeline, you heard the same words and decided, they're wrong. I'm brilliant. Same event, different meaning, different timeline. Go back, revise, install the new meaning, and watch the double bind dissolve. Another interference pattern is environmental entanglement. The people and places that knew you in the old timeline act as anchor points. Every time you see them, they observe you as the old version, and their observation collapses you back. It's not their fault. It's quantum mechanics. They're entangled with the version of you they've always known. And when you change, when you shift timelines, their observation creates drag. This is why it's hard to change in your hometown. Why old friends say you've changed, like it's a bad thing. They're not trying to hold you back. They're just observing the version they're used to, and their observation interferes with your new timeline. The solution is boundaries, the witness boundary script. When someone tries to pull you back into old patterns, you have to interrupt the pattern. Not rudely, just clearly. Maybe they bring up an old story, an old failure, an old version of you. And instead of laughing along, you say, yeah, that was a different version of me. I'm not that person anymore. Simple, direct. It resets the observation. It tells them, I've shifted. Observe the new version. Most people will adjust. Some won't. And the ones who won't, you have to limit exposure. Not forever. Just during the stabilization period. Because the first 72 hours after a timeline collapse are the most vulnerable. Any interference during that window can snap you back. There's also the nostalgia trap. This is when you romanticize the old timeline. When you start thinking, maybe it wasn't so bad. Maybe I should go back. This happens when the new timeline feels uncomfortable. When you're in the tunnel but you're not through yet, and your brain wants the familiar, the known, even if the known was painful, even if you hated it, because at least it was predictable. Nostalgia is quantum quicksand. The moment you start reminiscing about the old timeline, you start collapsing back into it. Because attention is observation, and observation collapses reality. The antidote is present moment focus. Every time you catch yourself thinking about the old timeline, redirect. Not to the future, to now. What's happening right now? What's working right now? What's good right now? Stay here. Because the old timeline only exists if you observe it. If you stop feeding it attention, it fades. It loses coherence. And the new timeline stabilizes. One more interference pattern, the witnesses problem. These are the people who knew you when. Family, old friends, ex-partners. They hold a version of you in their mind. And that version is strong. It's been reinforced over years, maybe decades. And when you shift timelines, their version of you doesn't update automatically. They still see the old you, and seeing is observing. And observing is collapsing. So every time you're around them, they're collapsing you back into the old timeline without realizing it. This is why massive transformations often require a hermit phase. Temporary isolation, not forever. Just long enough to stabilize the new timeline. 3 months, 6 months, a year. You pull back from the people and places that anchor you to the old version. You create a clean field. No interference, just you and the new timeline. And once the new timeline stabilizes, once it becomes your default, then you can reintroduce the witnesses. But by then, the new you is so solid that their old observations don't have power anymore. Here's your protocol. Map your anchor points. 5 people, places, or habits that tether you to the old timeline. Write them down. Then create a 72-hour clean field. 3 days with 0 contact with those anchors. No calls, no visits, no social media stalking. Just 3 days. During those 3 days, live fully in your target timeline. Inhabit it, act as if, observe it, and notice what happens. Notice how much easier it is to stay in the new frequency when the old anchors aren't pulling at you. That's quantum coherence. And once you feel it, there's a method called saturation. You flood all 5 senses with target timeline data. You don't just visualize, you immerse. You create a physical environment that reflects the target timeline. If you're collapsing into wealth, you don't sit in your cluttered apartment visualizing millions. You go to the places wealthy people go. You walk through high-end stores. You test drive expensive cars. You eat at nice restaurants. Not to buy, to saturate, to let your senses experience the frequency of that timeline. Because your quantum system doesn't process words. It processes energy. And the energy of wealth is in the physical experience of it. One man I worked with wanted to collapse into a relationship. He'd been single for 5 years. So I had him do a saturation weekend. 48 hours immersed in the relationship timeline. He set his apartment as if his partner lived there. 2 coffee cups, 2 toothbrushes. He made dinner for 2. He watched movies on the couch and imagined her next to him. He felt her presence. He spoke to her. He laughed at jokes she made. For 48 hours, he lived as if she were already there. And here's what happened. 3 days later, he matched with someone on an app. First date felt like they'd known each other for years. Within 6 weeks, she'd moved in. Within 6 months, engaged. The weekend collapsed the timeline because he didn't just think about it. He saturated in it. He made it real before it was visible. Another speed technique is future memory installation. You create fake memories of target timeline events. You close your eyes and remember something that hasn't happened yet. Remember the conversation. Remember the handshake. Remember the celebration. And you don't visualize it vaguely. You make it vivid, specific, real. You add emotional texture. You add sensory detail. You make it feel like something that already occurred. And then you open your eyes and go about your day. And your brain, which can't distinguish between real memories and imagined ones, starts treating that event as if it already happened, which means it starts collapsing the timeline where it did happen. Because your brain's job is to create coherence between memory and reality. And if the memory says it happened, reality has to catch up. But here's the critical part. Silence. You can't talk about what you're collapsing. Not yet. Not until it stabilizes. Because talking about it invites observation from others. And other people's doubt, even unspoken, creates interference. Their skepticism is an observation, and observation collapses. So when you talk about your desired timeline to someone who doesn't believe in it, you're giving them permission to collapse it into the not happening timeline every time they think that'll never work. Or they're delusional. That's an observation, and it creates drag. This is why mystics talked about keeping desires secret. Not because secrecy is magical, because silence protects coherence. It keeps the collapse clean, uncontaminated. Once the timeline stabilizes, once the evidence appears, then you can talk. Then their observation reinforces instead of interferes. But until then, keep it to yourself. Collapse in silence. There's also the contrary action protocol. When your current timeline logic says do this, you do the opposite. This works because your current timeline logic is designed to keep you in the current timeline. It's coherent with where you are. So if you follow it, you stay where you are. But if you want to shift timelines, you have to act contrary to the logic of the timeline you're leaving. If logic says save money, you spend. If logic says wait, you move. If logic says play it safe, you take the risk. Not recklessly, strategically. You ask, what would I do if I were already in the target timeline? And then you do that, even if it makes no sense here. And then there's the quantum deadline. You set a collapse date and treat it as inevitable. Not a goal, not a hope, a done deal. By this date, this timeline will have collapsed. And then you reverse engineer from that date. What would I need to do in the week before, the month before? And you do those things. Not as preparation, as confirmation. You're acting from the timeline where it already happened. You're just doing the echo actions, the residual movements. And when you approach a timeline collapse with that level of certainty, reality has no choice but to comply. Let's pause for a moment. Take a breath with me, wherever you are right now. Just bring your attention to your breath. Inhale slowly through your nose. Fill your lungs. Hold for a moment at the top, then exhale completely through your mouth. Let everything go. Do that 2 more times. Breathing in, holding, releasing. Good. Now place one hand on your chest. Feel your heartbeat. This is your quantum system. Alive, functioning, collapsing timelines every single second. You're not learning something new. You're remembering something you already know. You're remembering that you're the observer. And the observer creates reality. Now let's talk about the proof paradox, because this is where most people sabotage their collapses. They start collapsing a timeline. They do everything right. They shift identity. They act as if. They saturate. They stay silent. And then they start checking the bank account, checking the phone, checking the mirror, checking for evidence. And every time they check, they collapse back to the current timeline. Because checking is observing what is, not what's becoming. And quantum systems freeze when you watch them too closely. This is called the quantum Zeno effect. A watched pot never boils. A watched particle never moves. The more you measure a quantum system, the slower it changes, because measurement collapses it into its current state. Every measurement is a snapshot, and too many snapshots prevent motion. So when you keep checking for evidence, you're taking too many snapshots. You're freezing the collapse mid-process. And then you wonder why nothing's changing. It's because you're watching too closely. The solution is detached involvement. You care deeply about the outcome, but you hold it lightly. You're invested but not attached. You know it's happening, but you don't need proof. This is the hardest balance to strike, because your ego wants validation. Your fear wants reassurance. But the timeline collapses fastest when you don't need evidence, when you're so certain that checking becomes irrelevant. Signs are breadcrumbs, not proof. When you see something that aligns with your target timeline, that's the universe saying, you're on track. Keep going. But it's not proof that it's done. It's confirmation that the collapse is in progress. Most people see a breadcrumb and either get too excited or too doubtful. They either think, it's working, I can relax now, or they think that's just coincidence. Neither response is helpful. The correct response is noted. And then you keep collapsing. You keep observing. You keep inhabiting. Because breadcrumbs lead somewhere, but you have to keep walking. There's also the patience paradox. The timeline collapses when you're in relaxed certainty, not desperate waiting. Waiting is future-focused. It's saying, I don't have it yet, but I will. And that yet is the problem, because yet is observing lack. Relaxed certainty is present-focused. It's saying, it's already done. I'm just letting the 3D catch up. There's no waiting. There's just existing in the new frequency while the old reality rearranges. Doubt creates branching timelines. Every time you doubt, you split. One version of you in the it's working timeline, another version in the it's not working timeline. And as long as you're split, you're in superposition, uncollapsed. The goal is to merge those branches, to become singular, to observe only one timeline, the target. And that requires eliminating doubt, not suppressing it, eliminating it. By proving to yourself over and over that the target timeline is real, that it exists, that you can access it, that it's just as valid as the current timeline. Here's a protocol. The 7-day blackout. For 7 days, you don't check anything. No bank account, no scale, no social media, no email refreshing, nothing. You live in the target timeline for 7 days without measuring the current one. And during those 7 days, you journal breadcrumbs, little things you notice, tiny shifts, thoughts, feelings, synchronicities. But you don't attach meaning to them. You just log them. And at the end of 7 days, you read the journal. And you'll see things moved. Reality shifted, not in obvious ways, but in small, undeniable ways. And those small shifts are the leading edge of the collapse. They're the first pixels of the new timeline rendering. And here's the most important mindset shift. Adopt the of course response. When something aligns with your target timeline, instead of surprise, you respond with, of course. Of course that happened. Of course they called. Of course the money showed up. Of course it worked out. Not because you're faking confidence, but because you're observing from the timeline where these things are normal, expected, inevitable. And when you train that response, you stop being shocked by evidence. And when you stop being shocked, you stop collapsing back into doubt. Can you notice evidence without needing it? That's the test. Can you see the breadcrumb and smile and keep walking? Can you let reality confirm what you already know instead of trying to convince you of what you doubt? Because the quantum field responds to your frequency, not your words. And the frequency of needing proof is very different from the frequency of already knowing. Now let's get specific about relationships, because this is where people get confused. Can you collapse a timeline involving another person? Can you collapse a specific person into your reality? And the answer is yes, but not the... There's a couple I know who reunited after 5 years of silence. No contact, no communication. She'd moved on. Or so it seemed. But he decided to collapse the timeline where they were together. So he didn't reach out. He didn't chase. He didn't try to convince her. He just became the version of himself who was with her. He revised their breakup. He rewrote it in his mind as a temporary pause, not an ending. He lived from the frequency of being in the relationship. He spoke to her in his mind. He felt her presence. He acted as if, and after 4 months of this, she reached out. Random text, thinking about you. Within 2 weeks, they were back together. Within 6 months, engaged. He didn't change her mind. He switched timelines. He collapsed into the version where she chose him. And in that timeline, her choice was inevitable. But here's the ethical boundary. You can collapse the timeline where someone chooses you, but you can't collapse the timeline where they don't have other choices. Free will exists across all timelines. In some timelines, they choose you. In others, they don't. Your job is to find and collapse into the one where they do, not to force them into that timeline. The difference is subtle but critical. You're not manipulating. You're selecting. And here's the self-concept bridge. Every relationship collapse requires your identity shift first. If you're collapsing a romantic relationship, you have to become the version of you who is in that relationship. What does that version believe? How do they move? How do they think? What do they tolerate? What do they require? You shift into that identity, and the person reflects back the matching behavior. There's also the 3D detachment rule. You have to stop observing current relationship status as permanent. They're not texting you. Irrelevant. That's current timeline data. In the target timeline, they're obsessed with you. So you observe that, not what's happening now, what's happening there. And the more you observe there, the faster here shifts to match. Try this exercise. Script 3 interactions from your desired relationship timeline. Full sensory detail. What do you say? What do they say? How do they look at you? How do you feel? Make it vivid. Make it real. And then read it every night before sleep. Let your subconscious process it. Let your quantum system collapse into it. And don't check. Don't measure. Don't look at their social media. Just collapse. And within weeks, the interactions start happening. Maybe not exactly as scripted, but the energy matches. The outcome matches. Now let's talk money. Because money timelines are the easiest to collapse. Money has no emotion. It's pure quantum. It's just energy. Numbers, flow. There's no meaning attached until you attach it. which means if you can stay emotionally neutral about money, you can collapse financial timelines faster than any other kind. The problem is most people aren't neutral. They're entangled with scarcity, poverty consciousness, the belief that money is hard to get, that you have to work for it, that there's not enough. And every time you observe money through that lens, you collapse the scarcity timeline. The one where money is always tight, always stressful, always just out of reach. But there's another timeline, one where money flows easily, where it comes from unexpected sources, where it's abundant, natural, effortless, and that timeline is just as real as this one. You're just not observing it. You're observing the scarcity one. An observation determines reality. Here's the protocol. Define your exact financial timeline. Not vague abundance, exact numbers. How much in your bank account? How much monthly income? From what sources? Get specific, because the quantum field needs coordinates, not wishes. Then ask, what does the version of me with that financial reality believe about money? They believe it's easy. They believe it flows. They believe they're magnetic to it. They believe they're worth it. They don't worry. They don't stress. They don't check the account obsessively. They just exist in financial ease. Now become that version. Not when the money shows up. Now, start making decisions from that version. What would they buy? What would they skip? How would they spend their morning? Not worrying about money, that's for sure. Maybe they'd go to a nice coffee shop instead of making instant at home. Maybe they'd buy the good groceries instead of the cheap ones. Small shifts, identity level shifts. Not to spend money you don't have recklessly, but to act from abundance instead of scarcity. There was a woman who did this. She'd been $50,000 in debt for 3 years. Drowning. Every month was panic. And then she tried the financial timeline collapse. She defined her target. Debt-free, $10,000 in savings, 3 income streams. Then she asked, what does debt-free me do? And the answer was, she doesn't panic. She doesn't check the account 12 times a day. She doesn't buy the cheapest everything. She values herself. So this woman started acting as if she didn't ignore her debt, but she stopped observing it as permanent. She revised her financial story. Instead of, I'm buried in debt, she said, I'm in a temporary transition. My abundance is catching up. She started buying herself flowers once a week. Small luxury, $14. From the debt timeline perspective, insane. From the abundance timeline perspective, normal. And within 90 days, the debt started dissolving. A tax refund she forgot about, $7,000. A freelance project, $8,000. A family member paid back an old loan, $12,000. Within 6 months, debt-free. She didn't get a raise. She didn't win the lottery. She switched timelines, and the money came from sources she never anticipated. This is the invisible resources principle. Money doesn't just come from your job. It comes from the quantum field, and the quantum field has infinite sources. Refunds, gifts, windfalls, clients, sales, opportunities, things you can't predict, things you can't plan, but things that exist in the timeline where you're financially abundant. So stop limiting money to the sources you know. Stop thinking, my income is fixed. It's not. There are infinite income streams in infinite timelines. You just have to collapse into the one where they flow to you. Here's your exercise. Define your exact financial timeline. Write the numbers, the sources if you know them, or leave them blank if you don't. Then do a wealthy self-spending audit. What does that version buy that you don't? What do they skip that you currently buy? Make a list. Then make one wealthy timeline purchase this week. Something that version would buy. Within your current means but aligned with that identity. Maybe it's the organic version instead of the regular. Maybe it's the nice pen instead of the cheap one. Small, but symbolic. Because symbols are quantum markers. They tell your system, this is the timeline now, and do this. Revise your broke stories. Every story you tell about money struggle, rewrite it. That time you couldn't pay rent, revise it. In the new version, the money showed up. That time you got rejected for the loan, revise it. You got approved. Not because you're denying reality, because you're switching which reality you're observing. And when you change your financial history, you change your financial future, because they're entangled. Has money appeared from a source you didn't anticipate? If not yet, it will. Stay in the frequency. Keep observing the abundant timeline, and reality will rearrange to match. Let's talk about health and body timelines now, because your body is quantum too. Every cell, every system, it's responding to observation just like everything else. The placebo effect proves this. People take sugar pills thinking they're medicine, and they heal. Not because the pill did anything, because their belief, their observation changed their biology. They collapsed into the healthy timeline by observing it as real. Spontaneous remissions. Doctors call them miracles because they can't explain them. Cancer disappears. Chronic illness vanishes. No medical intervention. What happened? The person switched timelines. They stopped observing themselves as sick and started observing themselves as healed. And their body, which is just energy following observation, had to match. But most people treat their current body as permanent. They look in the mirror and see flaws and think, this is just how I am. And that observation collapses it, locks it in, makes it real. But your body is one timeline data. There's a timeline where your body is exactly how you want it. Strong, healthy, energized, attractive. That timeline exists. You're just not observing it. The solution is the assumption of health protocol. You live from the healthy body timeline immediately. Not when you lose the weight, not when the pain goes away. Now, you move like someone whose body works perfectly. You eat like someone who loves their body. You speak about your body like it's a miracle, because it is. And when you observe your body as healthy, it has to become healthy. Because observation determines biology. There was a man who was told he had 6 months to live. Terminal. The doctors were certain. And he decided, I'm not dying in 6 months. He didn't deny the diagnosis, but he didn't accept it as his timeline either. He revised it. In his mind, the scan was wrong. The doctors misread it. He was healthy, and he started living from that timeline. He made plans for 2 years out. He booked a trip for next year. He talked about the future as if it was guaranteed. And 6 months passed. He went back for scans. The tumor was gone, completely. The doctors had no explanation. He did. He switched timelines. Now, I'm not saying ignore medicine. I'm saying don't let medicine be the only observer. You're an observer too, and your observation matters. Maybe even more than the... And do the revision technique with health too. Any past injury or illness, revise it. See it healing perfectly. See your body responding beautifully. Rewrite the story. Not to pretend it didn't happen, but to change what it meant. Maybe the injury taught you resilience. Maybe the illness showed you your strength. Reframe it, and then let your body catch up to the new story. Now we're in the final stretch. Let's talk about stabilization, because collapsing the timeline is one thing. Keeping it is another. Some manifestations disappear because people don't stabilize them. They collapse the new timeline, get excited, and then unconsciously drift back to the old one. The first 90 days in a new timeline are critical. This is the stabilization period. The window where the new timeline is fragile, where interference can pull you back. So you have to be vigilant. The gratitude lock is the most powerful stabilization tool. Not forced gratitude, real appreciation. When you appreciate what's in your new timeline, you strengthen it. You make it more real, more solid. Appreciation is sustained observation. And sustained observation deepens the collapse. So every day, notice what's working. Notice what's changed. Notice what's better. And feel genuine appreciation for it. Not to get more, just to anchor the now. And here's how you know the timeline has stabilized. It stops being exciting. It becomes normal, the new normal principle. When your desired timeline was a dream, it felt thrilling. But when you're living in it, it's just life. That's the sign of stabilization. When the thing you wanted desperately becomes boring. When the relationship that felt impossible becomes routine. When the income that felt like a fantasy becomes expected. That's when you know you're locked in. There's a business owner I know who collapsed a 7-figure timeline and maintained it for 10 years. And I asked him, how? How do you stay there? And he said, I stopped celebrating it. Not because I'm not grateful, but because celebrating implies it's special. And special implies it's not normal. And if it's not normal, it's not stable. So I just let it be my baseline. I let it be boring. And boring is stable. Boring is permanent. But stabilization also requires pruning. You have to systematically remove old timeline anchors. The people who still see you as the old version, the places that trigger old patterns, the habits that belong to the old timeline. You prune them, not forever, but until the new timeline is solid. And once it's solid, you can reintroduce some of them. But by then, you're so locked into the new frequency that they can't pull you back. You also need witness upgrades. Surround yourself with people from the new timeline, people who see you as the new version, who treat you as the new version, whose observation reinforces the new timeline instead of interfering with it. This might mean new friends, new community, new environment. It might feel lonely at first, but it's necessary, because witnesses determine which timeline stays stable. And here's the expansion principle. Once you stabilize one timeline, you can collapse additional ones faster because you've proven to yourself that it works. You've built collapse momentum, so the second timeline comes quicker, the third even quicker. You become a serial collapser, and eventually timeline shifting becomes second nature. You don't even think about it, you just do it. But there's also a complacency warning. Coasting can create slow drift. If you stop observing the new timeline intentionally, if you take it for granted, you can slowly drift back toward old patterns. Not all at once, just inch by inch. So you have to stay conscious, not paranoid, not hypervigilant, just aware. Keep checking in, keep observing, keep appreciating, keep inhabiting. Here's your final exercise. Define your new timeline normal. What's no longer remarkable? What's just life now? Write it out. This is wealth. This is love. This is health. This is success. Not exciting, just real. Then create a 90-day stabilization plan. What will you do daily to reinforce this timeline? Maybe it's a morning practice. Maybe it's an evening review. Maybe it's a weekly check-in. Whatever it is, commit to 90 days. And after 90 days, the timeline is locked. It's yours. It's permanent. And then choose your next collapse. Because you don't stop at one. You're a quantum being. You have access to infinite timelines, infinite versions of reality. So once this one stabilizes, ask, what's next? What timeline am I collapsing next? And start the process again. Identity shift, observation, saturation, collapse, stabilization. You become a master at this. And life becomes a series of conscious timeline selections instead of random circumstance. Does your desired timeline now feel boring instead of exciting? If so, congratulations. You've stabilized. You've arrived. Now go collapse the next one. Let me close with this. You now hold the operating manual for reality itself. Not theory, not philosophy, not wishful thinking. Actual quantum mechanics applied to your life. Every timeline you desire already exists. Right now. Same space. Different frequency. You're not creating anything. You're selecting, tuning, observing. And the universe, which is just a quantum field responding to observation, has to match. The cheat code was never hidden. It was just taught wrong. You were taught to work hard, to earn, to deserve, to wait. But those are classical physics rules, linear, cause then effect, and they work in the material world. But you're not just material. You're quantum, and quantum doesn't play by those rules. Quantum says effect then cause, observation before evidence, identity before circumstances. Be it first, and it becomes. 30 days from now, you'll look back at this moment as the fork. The decision point, the split. There's a timeline where you listened to this and did nothing. And there's a timeline where you listened and collapsed. Where you shifted. Where you became. Both exist. Both are real. Which one are you choosing? Because choosing is the act. Choosing is the observation. Choosing collapses the timeline. Your old timeline will feel like a dream you woke up from. Distant. Fuzzy. Hard to believe you ever lived there. And people will ask, what happened? How did you change so fast? And you'll smile. Because you know, you didn't change. You just switched frames. You collapsed into the version that was always there. Waiting. Watching. Ready. Welcome to the timeline where you're already everything you want it to be. Not someday. Now this is it. This is the frame. And now that you're here, now that you've collapsed, there's only one thing left to do. Stay. Observe. Stabilize. And then collapse the next one. Because you're not done. You're just beginning. You're a quantum collapser now. And quantum collapsers don't stop at one miracle. They live in a state of continuous collapse, continuous selection, continuous becoming. This is your reality now. Infinite timelines, infinite possibilities, infinite versions of you. And you get to choose which one becomes real. So choose well. Choose boldly. Choose the one that makes your soul sing. Because that's the timeline that's calling you. That's the one reaching back through time, rearranging your present, pulling you toward it. And all you have to do is observe it, inhabit it, become it. The quantum field will handle the rest. It always does. It has to. Because that's how quantum mechanics works. That's how reality works. That's how you work. You're not learning this. You're remembering it. You've always been a quantum collapser. You just forgot. You got trained out of it. Socialized into linear thinking. Convinced that reality is fixed. Solid, unchangeable, but now you know the truth. Reality is fluid. Quantum. Responsive. And you're the one it responds to. So let me give you one more visualization. A short one. Close your eyes again if you can. Take a deep breath. And imagine you're standing in a vast library. Infinite shelves stretching in every direction. And on each shelf, there's a book. Each book is a timeline, a version of your life. Some are thick, some are thin, some are worn, some are pristine. And you can pull any book off the shelf and open it. When you do, you step into that timeline. You become that version. Walk through this library now. Look at the spines. See the titles? There's the timeline where you're wealthy. There's the timeline where you're in love. There's the timeline where you're healthy, strong, successful, free. All of them here. All of them real. Now choose one. Pull it off the shelf. Feel the weight of it in your hands. Open to the first page and read. Read about this version of you. See them, feel them, become them. And know this, the moment you close this book and open your eyes, you've collapsed into it. The library exists in you. The books exist in you. The timelines exist in you. You are the library. You are the book. You are the story. And you're writing it right now with every observation. Take one more breath. And when you're ready, open your eyes. You're not the same person who closed them. You've shifted, maybe just slightly. Maybe dramatically, but you've shifted. Because observation changes everything, and you just observed a new timeline. You just collapsed into it. And now your job is simple. Stay there. Keep observing it. Keep inhabiting it. Keep being it. Until it becomes so normal you forget there was ever another way. Let's talk about one more thing before we close. The thing nobody tells you about timeline collapse. It's not always comfortable. In fact, it's usually uncomfortable. Because you're existing between timelines for a while. You're in the tunnel. You're in the gap. And the gap is where most people quit. Because the gap feels like failure. It feels like nothing's working. It feels like you're making it all up. But the gap is actually proof that it's working. The gap is the space between timelines. It's the quantum foam. It's the probability cloud before it collapses. And it feels unstable because it is unstable. You're supposed to feel off balance. You're supposed to feel like you don't fit anywhere. Because you don't fit in the old timeline anymore and you haven't fully landed in the new one yet. You're between. And between is uncomfortable. But here's what you need to know. Discomfort is data. It's information. It's your system recalibrating. Your neural pathways rewiring. Your quantum field reorganizing. And reorganization always feels chaotic before it feels clear. So when you feel the discomfort, don't interpret it as wrong. Interpret it as progress. You're in the tunnel. Keep going. The other side is close. There's a phrase in physics called quantum fluctuation. It's when the quantum field spontaneously creates and destroys particles. Constantly. Chaotically. Energy popping in and out of existence. And that's what the gap feels like. Things appearing and disappearing. Opportunities showing up and vanishing. People coming close and pulling away. Money flowing in and flowing out. It's fluctuation. And fluctuation precedes stabilization. Always. So if your reality feels chaotic right now, good. It means you're in the collapse process. It means the field is reorganizing around your new observation. Don't try to control the fluctuation. Don't try to force it to make sense. Just stay in your new identity. Stay in your new observation. And let the field do what it does. Eventually the fluctuations slow. The chaos settles. And the new timeline stabilizes. But you have to ride out the gap. You have to trust the process. You have to stay in the frequency even when the evidence is confusing. And here's another thing nobody tells you. People will think you're crazy. When you start collapsing timelines, when you start acting from the version of you that doesn't exist yet in the visible world, people will notice, and they'll have opinions. They'll say you're delusional, unrealistic, irresponsible. They'll tell you to be practical, to face reality, to stop dreaming. And every word they say is an observation. An attempt to collapse you back into the timeline they're comfortable with. But here's the truth. They're not wrong from their perspective. From the timeline they're observing, you are being unrealistic. You are ignoring reality. But you're not ignoring reality. You're just observing a different one, and their reality and your reality don't have to match. In fact, they can't match, because you're on different timelines. They're observing one frame. You're observing another, and both are real. So when people call you crazy, take it as confirmation. It means you've shifted far enough that they can't see the timeline you're on anymore. It means the gap is widening. It means you're almost through. Because if you were still on their timeline, they wouldn't notice anything different. The fact that they're uncomfortable means you're collapsing successfully, but you still have to protect your collapse. You still have to maintain boundaries. You don't owe anyone an explanation. You don't have to justify your new reality. You don't have to convince them it's real. Because their belief is irrelevant. Their observation doesn't have power unless you give it power. So when they question you, smile. nod, and keep collapsing. Let your results speak. Let the collapse timeline be the proof, not your words, not your explanations. Your living reality. And here's one of the most powerful secrets about timeline collapse. It's contagious. When you successfully collapse into a new timeline and stabilize there, other people start collapsing too. Not because you told them to, not because you taught them, but because they observed you. They watched you shift. They watched reality rearrange around you, and their subconscious registered, that's possible. And the moment something becomes possible in someone's awareness, their quantum field opens to it. You become proof, living proof, walking evidence that timelines can be collapsed. That reality is fluid. That change doesn't have to take decades, and some people will resent you for it, because you're disrupting their story about what's possible. But others will be inspired. They'll start asking questions. They'll start experimenting. They'll start collapsing their own timelines. And that's when you realize, this isn't just about you. This is about collective timeline shifting. This is about raising the frequency of reality itself. Every person who learns to collapse timelines consciously makes it easier for the next person. Because the quantum field is interconnected. We're all entangled. Your collapse sends ripples through the field. It creates pathways. It opens doors, and someone else, somewhere else, benefits from the work you did. From the timeline you collapsed. They don't know you. They'll never meet you. But they'll find it easier to shift, because you shifted first. That's the real gift of this work. It's not just personal transformation. It's collective evolution. It's upgrading the operating system of reality for everyone. And the more people who learn to do this consciously, the faster the collective timelines shift. The faster we move into the timelines where humanity thrives, where problems that seem impossible suddenly have solutions, where barriers that seemed permanent suddenly dissolve. You're not just collapsing your own timeline. You're participating in the collapse of humanity's timeline. And that's sacred work. That's evolutionary work. That's why you're here. That's why this information found you. Because you're one of the ones who's supposed to know, one of the ones who's supposed to shift, one of the ones who's supposed to show others that it's possible. So take this seriously, not in a heavy way, but in a committed way. Your timeline collapse matters, not just to you, to everyone whose life touches yours, to everyone who observes you, to everyone who's watching, consciously or unconsciously, to see if change is real. You're the evidence they're waiting for. So collapse boldly, collapse completely, collapse unapologetically, and let your reality speak. Now let's bring this full circle, back to the beginning, back to the hook. Your desired life already exists, right now, and the distance between here and there is collapsing every second you observe it, every moment you inhabit it, every breath you take from that timeline. The quantum cheat code isn't visualization. It's not affirmation. It's observation. It's becoming. It's switching frames with the precision of a quantum scientist and the faith of a mystic. And here's what you now understand that most people don't. Manifestation isn't magic. It's mechanics. It's physics. It's the way reality actually works when you stop trying to force it and start learning to navigate it. The universe isn't withholding anything from you. It's offering you everything, every possible timeline, every possible version, all at once. And all you have to do is choose, observe, collapse. The twins with identical DNA who end up in different realities. They made different observations, different choices, different collapses, same starting point, different timelines. And now you know, you can change timelines at any point. Your starting point doesn't determine your ending point. Your observation does. Your focus does. Your identity does. Heisenberg's uncertainty principle showed us that we can't know both the position and momentum of a particle simultaneously. The act of measuring one changes the other. And that's the key to manifestation. You can't measure your current position and your future momentum at the same time. You have to choose. Observe where you are and you stay where you are. Observe where you're going and you move there. You can't do both. So stop measuring your current circumstances and start observing your target timeline. That's the uncertainty principle applied to your life and the 12-year-old Minecraft speedrunner. He knows something profound. The fastest route isn't the obvious route. It's the glitch route, the shortcut, the cheat code. He doesn't play the game the way it was designed to be played. He finds the exploits, the tunnels, the ways to skip entire sections and land directly at the end. That's quantum tunneling. That's timeline collapse. That's what you're doing now. You're not playing reality the slow way anymore. You're finding the glitches, the shortcuts, the quantum pathways that let you skip the struggle and land directly in the desired outcome. So here's your final practice. your daily protocol. Every morning when you wake up, before you check your phone, before you measure your current reality, take 90 seconds to observe your target timeline. Feel it, inhabit it, become it. That's your morning collapse. Then, throughout the day, make decisions from that timeline. What would that version do? Say, choose, be that version. And every night before you sleep, revise the day. If anything happened that doesn't match your target timeline, rewrite it, revise it, collapse it into alignment. That's your evening stabilization, morning collapse, daytime embodiment, evening revision. That's the cycle. That's the practice. That's how you stay locked on the target frequency. And if you do this consistently for 30 days, your reality will be unrecognizable. Not because you worked harder, not because you hustled more, but because you collapsed into a different timeline. A timeline where the thing you want is normal, expected, inevitable, already yours. And when people ask you how you did it, how you changed so fast, you'll know the answer. But you might not say it, because the quantum cheat code works better in silence. So you'll just smile, and you'll say something simple, something true. I just decided to see things differently. I just chose a different reality. And they might not understand, but that's okay. Because you do, and that's all that matters. You're walking out of this moment different than you walked in. You're observing differently, thinking differently, being differently. The old timeline is already fading. The new one is already forming, and all that's left is to sustain the observation, to keep inhabiting, to keep collapsing, until the new becomes normal, until the impossible becomes obvious, until the dream becomes the default. This is who you are now. A conscious reality collapser, a quantum navigator, a timeline shifter, not because you're special, but because you remembered. You remembered that you were never stuck, never limited, never at the mercy of circumstances. You were always the observer. And the observer creates reality. Always has. Always will. So go create. Go observe. Go collapse. The quantum field is waiting for your decision. The timelines are waiting for your observation. Your desired reality is waiting for you to stop treating it like a future destination and start experiencing it as a present location. Because it's not ahead of you. It's right here. Right now. Layered on top of this moment. Vibrating at a frequency you can match anytime you choose, and you're choosing now. Right now. This moment. This breath. This observation. You're collapsing. You're shifting. You're becoming. And nothing will ever be the same. Because you can't unknow this. You can't unsee it. You can't go back to thinking reality is fixed. You know the truth now. And the truth is, reality is yours. Has always been yours. Will always be yours. You're the observer. You're the collapser. You're the creator. Welcome home. Welcome to the timeline where you finally remembered who you are. Welcome to the quantum life. Welcome to your collapsed reality. It's been waiting for you. And now you're here. Now you're awake. Now you're collapsing. And the universe is celebrating. Because another observer just came online. Another collapser just activated. Another reality shifter just remembered the cheat code. And the cheat code is simple. It's always been simple. Observe what you want as if it's already real. Become the version who has it. Stay there until the 3D catches up. That's it. That's the whole code. Everything else is just detail. Just technique. Just support for that one core truth. You are the observer, and observation collapses reality. But let's get extremely practical now. Because knowing the theory is one thing, living it daily is another. I'm going to give you relapse-proofing plans, day-by-day micro-challenges, specific scripts you can use when you feel yourself slipping back. Because you will slip. Everyone does. The question isn't if you'll have moments of doubt. The question is, what do you do when they hit? Let's start with the relapse-proofing plan. A relapse in timeline collapse isn't about failing. It's about unconsciously reverting to old observation patterns. You wake up one morning and automatically check your bank account with scarcity eyes. You scroll your ex's social media with longing instead of certainty. You look in the mirror with criticism instead of appreciation. These are mini collapses back to the old timeline. And if you catch them early, they're easy to correct. If you don't, they compound. Here's your first defense protocol. The morning interception routine. Before you do anything else, before you check your phone or get out of bed, you intercept your first thought. Your first thought of the day is your most powerful collapse point because your brain is still in theta wave state. It's suggestible, malleable, so the first thing you think about gets wired in deep. Most people waste this. They wake up and immediately think about their problems, their stress, their lack, and they collapse into the struggle timeline before they even brush their teeth. Instead, try this. The moment you wake up, before you move, place both hands on your chest. Feel your heartbeat. Take 3 slow breaths, and then say internally, I am in the timeline where everything is already solved. Not as an affirmation. As an observation, you're not trying to convince yourself. You're just noticing, just observing. And then you ask, what does today look like from this timeline? Let your mind wander. Let images come. Maybe you see yourself getting good news. Maybe you see yourself calm and focused. Maybe you see yourself laughing with someone. Whatever comes, that's the blueprint for today. That's the timeline you're collapsing into today. Do this for 7 days straight. Just 7. And watch how your days shift. You'll notice you're less reactive, less triggered, less pulled into drama, because you set the collapse direction first thing. You oriented your quantum system before the world started demanding your attention. Now let's talk about the midday slump. This is when most people lose coherence. Morning goes great. They're in the new timeline. They're observing consciously. And then noon hits. Something goes wrong. An unexpected bill. A rejection email. A conflict. And boom. Collapsed back. The old timeline floods in. Panic. Stress. The whole frequency drops. This is normal. Expected. And there's a protocol for it. It's called the reset breath practice. The moment you feel yourself collapsing backward, you stop everything. Doesn't matter where you are. Bathroom, car, office, you stop. And you take 1 full minute to reset. Here's how it works. Close your eyes if possible. If not, just soften your gaze downward. Breathe in for 4 counts. Hold for 4 counts. Exhale for 6 counts. The exhale is longer than the inhale. This activates your parasympathetic nervous system. It tells your body, we're safe. We're not in danger. We're choosing our response. Do this for 4 cycles. 4 breaths. That's about 1 minute. And during that minute, you don't try to fix anything. You don't strategize. You don't problem solve. You just breathe. And you remind yourself, this situation exists in the old timeline. In my target timeline, this is already resolved. I'm choosing to observe the resolution, not the problem. Then you open your eyes, and you ask, what would the resolved version of me do right now? And you do that, even if it's just smile, even if it's just walk away, even if it's just delete the email and trust. You act from the resolved timeline. And watch what happens. I worked with a woman who used this during a financial crisis. She got a notice that her rent was increasing by $800 a month. She couldn't afford it. Old timeline response would be panic, desperation, scrambling. Instead, she did the reset breath. 4 cycles. And then she asked, what does the version of me who easily affords this do? The answer surprised her. That version laughs, because $800 is nothing to her. So she laughed out loud, in her apartment, at the notice. And then she went about her day. Didn't call the landlord to beg. Didn't frantically search for new apartments. Just laughed and let it go. 3 days later, her company announced bonuses. Hers was $10,000. Unexpected, unplanned. More than enough to cover the increase for a year. She didn't fix the problem. She collapsed into the timeline where it wasn't a problem. Here's another example. A man trying to collapse a relationship timeline. The woman he wanted hadn't texted in 2 weeks. Old timeline says, she's not interested. Move on, it's over. And he felt that collapse happening. The doubt creeping in, so he used the reset breath. And he asked, what does the version of me who's with her do when she goes quiet? The answer, he doesn't chase. He doesn't panic. He knows she'll reach out when she's ready. He trusts, so he put his phone down, went to the gym, focused on his life. And that night she texted, long message, apologizing for being distant, asking to see him. He didn't chase her back into his reality. He stayed in the timeline where she chases him. And reality reflected it. Now let's build out your 30-day collapse intensive. This is a day-by-day micro-challenge program designed to build collapse momentum. Each day has 1 small challenge, 1 action, 1 observation. Do all 30, and by the end, timeline collapse will be automatic. You won't have to think about it. You'll just do it day 1. Identify your target timeline. Write 3 paragraphs describing 1 day in that timeline. First person. Present tense. Sensory detail. What you see, hear, smell, taste, touch, feel. Be specific. This is your anchor document. You'll return to it throughout the 30 days. Day 2. Wardrobe audit. Day 4. Future memory installation day. Pick 1 specific event from your target timeline. Something concrete. A conversation. A celebration. A moment. Close your eyes and remember it. Not visualize. Remember, as if it already happened. Spend 10 minutes building this memory. What were you wearing? What was said? How did you feel? Make it vivid. Then open your eyes and go about your day. Don't think about it again. Just let your subconscious process it. Day 5. Spend like your target self. Make one purchase today that your target timeline self would make. Doesn't have to be expensive. Could be the organic version instead of the regular. Could be the nice coffee instead of the instant. Could be the hardcover instead of the paperback. Small, symbolic, but aligned. This isn't about the money. It's about the identity. You're voting for the timeline with your choices. Day 6. Posture shift day. Set 3 alarms throughout the day, random times. When the alarm goes off, check your posture. Are you slouched, contracted, closed off? Immediately adjust. Straighten your spine. Open your chest. Lift your chin. Hold that posture for 60 seconds. Your target timeline self doesn't collapse inward. They expand. So expand, physically, and feel the frequency shift. Day 7. Silence day. You don't talk about your target timeline to anyone today. Not a word. Someone asks what you're working on, you give a vague answer. Someone asks what you want, you smile and change the subject. Today is about protecting the collapse from external observation. Keep it clean. Keep it yours. Notice how much easier it is to stay in the frequency when you're not defending it or explaining it. Day 8. Revision practice. Pick one event from the past week that didn't align with your target timeline. Something small, a conversation that went badly, a missed opportunity, a moment of doubt. Tonight before bed, revise it. Replay it in your mind the way it would have gone in your target timeline. See it, feel it, make it real. Then sleep. Let your subconscious integrate the new version. Day 9. Environment upgrade. Change one thing in your physical space to reflect your target timeline. Could be rearranging furniture. Could be adding a plant. Could be printing a photo. Could be cleaning one area completely. Your environment is an external observation. When you change it, you're telling your quantum system, we're in a new timeline now. The space reflects it. Day 10. Gratitude lock. Today you don't do forced gratitude. You do genuine appreciation. Find 3 things in your current reality that already match your target timeline. Maybe you woke up healthy. That's in the target timeline too. Maybe you had a good conversation. That's there too. Maybe you felt peaceful for 5 minutes. That's there too. Appreciate what's already aligned. This strengthens those collapse points. Day 11. Contrary action day. Your current timeline logic will tell you to do something today. Maybe it'll say stay home. Maybe it'll say don't spend that money. Maybe it'll say play it safe. Do the opposite. If logic says stay home, go out. If logic says don't spend, spend. If logic says play it safe, take a risk. Small, manageable, but contrary. This breaks the old pattern. Opens the tunnel. Day 12. Witness boundary practice. Someone will try to pull you into an old story today. An old identity. An old pattern. Your job is to interrupt it. Not rudely, just clearly. When they say remember when you always used to, you stop them. You say, that was a different version of me. I'm not that person anymore. Watch their reaction. Some will adjust. Some won't. The ones who don't, you note. They're anchor points. Limit exposure during the stabilization period. Day 13. Target self-interview. Sit down with a journal. Set a timer for 15 minutes. Interview your target timeline self. Ask them questions. How do you spend your mornings? What do you believe about yourself? What do you no longer tolerate? What brings you joy? Let the answers flow. Don't edit. Don't judge. Just write. This is intel. This is the blueprint. Use it. Day 14. Halfway check-in. You're 2 weeks in. Today you reread your Day 1 anchor document. The 3 paragraphs describing your target timeline. Does it still feel right? Does anything need adjusting? Update it if needed. Then ask yourself, have I noticed any shifts? Any breadcrumbs? Any evidence? Write them down. Don't analyze. Just document. You're building proof for yourself that this works. Day 15. Social media cleanse. Go through your feeds. Unfollow anyone who represents the old timeline. Anyone who triggers comparison. Anyone who makes you feel less than. Anyone who reinforces old stories. You're not being mean. You're being strategic. Your feed is a constant observation stream. Make sure it's observing the timeline you want. Day 16. Silence and stillness. No input today. No podcasts, no music, no TV, no scrolling. Just silence. Give your system space to integrate, space to recalibrate, space to lock in the new frequency. This will feel uncomfortable. Do it anyway. Discomfort is data. It means you're detoxing from constant stimulation. Let yourself be bored. Let yourself be still. Magic happens in the silence. Day 17. Random act of target self. Do one thing today that your target timeline self does regularly that you currently don't. Maybe they go to a specific place. Go there. Maybe they have a specific routine. Do it. Maybe they talk to strangers easily. Strike up a conversation. One act. Random. Aligned. This tells reality. I'm already that person. Day 18. Money consciousness shift. Today you look at every dollar you have as if it's evidence of abundance, not scarcity. You have $5? That's abundance. You have 50? Abundance. You have 500? Abundance. Stop looking at what you don't have. Start appreciating what you do, even if it's small, especially if it's small, because appreciation is an observation, and observation determines what multiplies. Day 19. Body Appreciation Day. No mirror criticism today. Every time you see your reflection, you find one thing to appreciate. Your eyes, your hands, your shoulders. Something, anything. Your body is quantum. It responds to observation. Observe it with criticism. It stays in the criticized timeline. Observe it with appreciation. It shifts into the appreciated timeline. Choose appreciation. Day 20. Impossible Action Day. Do one thing today that makes no logical sense from your current timeline, but makes perfect sense from your target timeline. Apply for the job you're not qualified for. Message the person who seems out of your league. Book the trip you can't afford yet. One impossible action. Watch reality respond. It always does. Day 21. 3-week mark. Major checkpoint. You're 3 weeks in. Timeline collapse momentum is building. Today you assess. Has your internal state shifted? Do you feel different? Think different? Move different? Even if external circumstances haven't changed yet, check internal. That's where the collapse happens first. Internal shifts precede external evidence. Always. If you feel different, you're collapsing. Trust it. Day 22. Future letter. Write a letter to yourself from your target timeline self. Dated 1 year from today. In the letter, your future self describes the past year. Everything that happened. Everything that aligned. Everything that collapsed into place. Write it as if it already occurred. First person, past tense. I did this. This happened. I became this. Then seal it. Put it somewhere safe. You'll open it in 1 year. Day 23. Energy audit. Today you notice what drains you and what fuels you. People, places, activities, content. Notice. And then make one shift. Remove one drain. Add one fuel source. Your energy is your frequency. Your frequency determines your timeline. Protect your energy like it's your most valuable asset. Because it is. Day 24. Parallel reality walk. Take a walk today in a place your target timeline self frequents. High-end neighborhood. Luxury store. University campus. Art gallery. Somewhere aligned with that version. Walk through it as if you belong. Not as a tourist. As a resident. Feel what it feels like to exist in that space naturally. Let your system acclimate to the frequency. Day 25. Relationship reality check. If you're collapsing a relationship timeline, today you check. Am I observing them as they are, or as I want them to be? If you're observing their current behavior with disappointment, you're collapsing the disappointment timeline. Shift. Observe them as the version who adores you, who chooses you, who shows up, even if current evidence says otherwise. Observation first. Evidence second. Day 26. 5-year vision collapse. Most people set 5-year goals. You're going to collapse a 5-year timeline into now. Pick one thing you thought would take 5 years. Financial goal, relationship goal, health goal, career goal. Now ask, what if it collapsed this year? What would have to be true? What would I have to believe? Who would I have to become? Write it out. Then start being that version today. Collapse the timeline. Skip the 5-year wait. Day 27. Certainty training. Today you practice walking around with unshakable certainty. Not confidence. Certainty. Confidence is, I think this will work. Certainty is, I know this is already done. Every time doubt creeps in, you say internally, it's already done. I'm just watching it unfold. Repeat it until you feel it. Certainty is the accelerant. The more certain you are, the faster the collapse. Day 28. Witness upgrade. You've been limiting exposure to old timeline witnesses. Today you add a new timeline witness. Find one person who sees you as the target version, who treats you as already successful, already loved, already thriving. Could be a new friend, a mentor. Here's your 90-day stabilization protocol. From day 31 to day 120, you do 3 things daily. Only 3. But you do them without fail. First, morning observation. Every morning, before you touch your phone, You spend 90 seconds observing your target timeline. This keeps the frequency locked in. This tells your quantum system, we're still here. We're still choosing this. Don't let the new normal become so normal that you stop observing it. Observation is what keeps it solid. Second, gratitude logging. Every evening you write down 3 things that happened today that match your target timeline. Even tiny things, especially tiny things. Someone smiled at you. You felt peaceful. You made a good choice. You had enough money for what you needed. You logged evidence. This trains your brain to notice alignment instead of looking for problems. Third, weekly revision. Every Sunday you review the week. Any moments where you slip back into old timeline observation? Revise them, rewrite them, collapse them back into alignment. This prevents drift. This keeps the timeline clean, because you're not trying to be perfect. You're just trying to stay conscious, and conscious observation is what creates permanent collapse. Do these 3 things for 90 days, and your new timeline becomes permanent. It becomes your set point, your default. And after 90 days, you can ease up. You don't have to be as rigorous, because by then, the timeline has stabilized. The cement has hardened, and you're locked in. But let's address the biggest fear people have about timeline collapse. What if I collapse it and then lose it? What if I get to the new timeline and then something happens and I fall back? This is a valid fear, and it's based on past experience. Most people have had the experience of getting the thing they wanted and then losing it, the relationship that ended, the money that disappeared, the health that degraded, and they're terrified it'll happen again. Here's the truth. You only lose a collapsed timeline if you stop observing it, if you take it for granted, if you start observing lack again, if you revert to old identity, if you let interference back in. But if you stay conscious, if you keep observing, if you maintain the frequency, it's permanent. You don't lose it. You build on it. Think of it like this. When you collapse a timeline, you're climbing to a new altitude. And at that altitude, the air is thinner. The pressure is different. Your body has to acclimate. If you climb too fast and don't acclimate, you get altitude sickness. You have to come back down. But if you climb steadily and let your system adjust, you can stay at that altitude forever. It becomes your new normal. Same with timeline collapse. If you collapse too fast without stabilization, you'll bounce back. But if you collapse intentionally and stabilize consciously, you stay. And then you can collapse the next timeline. And the next. You can keep climbing, keep expanding, keep upgrading. There's no limit, except the limit you place on your own observation. Let me give you one more detailed example. A full collapse story from start to finish. There was a woman, let's call her Sarah, who wanted to collapse a career timeline. She was working a job she hated, underpaid, undervalued, stuck. She wanted to be a freelance consultant making 6 figures. But she had no clients, no portfolio, no network. From a logical standpoint, it would take years to build. But she decided to collapse it. Day 1, she wrote her target timeline. Working from home, 3 to 4 clients at a time, high-paying contracts, flexible schedule, respected in her field. She got specific. She described her home office, the view from her window, the kind of clients she worked with, the projects she loved. She made it real in her mind. Then she started the identity shift. She asked, who is the version of me who's already a successful consultant? And the answer came, she's confident. She's selective. She doesn't chase clients. She attracts them. She values her time. She charges premium rates without apologizing. She's an expert. So Sarah started being that version. At her current job, she started carrying herself differently, speaking with more authority, setting boundaries, saying no to tasks that didn't align. She started dressing like a consultant, clean, professional, put together, small shifts. But identity level shifts. Then she did one impossible action. She reached out to a dream client, a company she thought was way out of her league. She didn't pitch. She didn't beg. She just sent a short message. I specialize in X. I've been following your work. If you ever need support in this area, I'd love to explore a collaboration. That's it. No attachment, no desperation, just information. And she hit send from the timeline where she was already a successful consultant. Not from the timeline where she was a desperate employee hoping for a break. The company wrote back, interested, let's talk. They hopped on a call. Sarah didn't undersell herself. She didn't offer a discount to get her foot in the door. She quoted her target rate, the rate her consultant self charged, the rate that felt insane from her employee self perspective. And they said yes. First client, 5-figure contract, within 2 weeks of starting her collapse. But here's where it gets interesting. After she landed that client, she felt the collapse wobble. She started doubting. Started thinking, this is a fluke. It won't happen again. This is just luck. And she caught herself. She did the reset breath. 4 cycles. Then she reminded herself, this isn't a fluke. This is my timeline. I'm a successful consultant. This is normal for me. She revised the doubt, collapsed it back into certainty. And she kept going. Within 3 months, she had 4 clients. Within 6 months, she quit her job. Within a year, she hit 6 figures. And the key wasn't that she worked harder than everyone else trying to build a consulting business. The key was that she observed herself as already successful from day one. She collapsed the timeline first. The clients followed. The money followed. The success followed, because she was already observing it as real. Now, 5 years later, she's still a successful consultant, still earning well, still loving her work, because she stabilized the collapse. She didn't take it for granted. She kept observing, kept appreciating, kept being the version, and the timeline stayed solid. That's the power of conscious collapse. That's what you're learning to do, not just once, but repeatedly, consistently, for the rest of your life. You're becoming someone who doesn't wait for reality to change. You're becoming someone who changes timelines at will, who observes consciously, who collapses intentionally, who creates reality instead of reacting to it. And here's what nobody tells you about this work. It gets easier. The first collapse is the hardest, because you're fighting years of conditioning, years of believing reality is fixed, years of thinking you're powerless. But once you collapse one timeline, once you see it work, the second one is easier. The third even easier, because you have proof. You have evidence. You know it works. And knowing is certainty, and certainty accelerates collapse. So if you're at the beginning of this journey, if you're just learning to observe consciously, be patient with yourself. Be compassionate. You're rewiring your entire relationship with reality. That doesn't happen overnight. It happens in moments, in choices, in observations, day by day, breath by breath, collapse by collapse. And every single one matters. Every single observation counts. Every single choice is a vote for a timeline. Vote wisely. Vote consciously. Vote for the timeline that makes your soul sing. Vote for the reality that expands you. Vote for the version of you that's already everything you want to be, because that version exists right now, right here, in this moment, layered on top of your current reality, waiting for you to observe it, waiting for you to become it, waiting for you to collapse into it, and you can. Right now, this moment. You don't need more time. You don't need more preparation. You don't need more permission. You just need to observe, to choose, to become. The quantum field is ready. The timeline is ready. Your desired reality is ready. The only question is, are you ready to stop waiting and start collapsing? Because the moment you say yes, the moment you decide, the moment you observe, it's done. The collapse happens instantly. The evidence just takes time to catch up. But the collapse itself? Instantaneous, immediate. Now this is the quantum cheat code. This is the reality hack. This is the secret that's been hidden in plain sight for 100 years. Observation creates reality. You are the observer. You create reality, and you get to choose which reality you create, which timeline you collapse, which version you become. So choose, observe, collapse, and welcome to the other side. Welcome to the timeline where you finally remembered who you are. Welcome to the reality you've been building. Welcome to your collapsed life. It's been waiting for you, and now you're here. Now you're awake. Now you're collapsing, and everything changes from this moment forward. Everything. Because you're not the same observer you were before this, and you never will be again. This is your new normal. Timeline collapse. Quantum navigation. Conscious reality creation. This is who you are now, not who you're becoming. Who you are, right now, in this moment. You are the quantum cheat code. You always were. You just finally remembered. And now that you remember, there's no going back. There's only forward, only expansion, only collapse after collapse after collapse. Building the reality you actually want, living the life you were always meant to live, being the version you were always meant to be. Welcome home.